Okay.
Okay. Uh, Here we are. Welcome back, everybody, to season 3 of Pete Carroll Was Right, the confusingly named Alabama football live video show. Tonight we have I'm Carter Spired here with Ben Litvin to break down, do a little preview of the season for kind of by position group for Alabama, and then talk about the big matchup this weekend with Florida State. Alas, our co-founder and co-host Mitchell Wesson is gallivanting about Europe at the moment, so he can't join us for this week's show. But he'll be back later in the season, and we're happy to be back, previewing and talking about Alabama football with y'all.
Yeah, it's great to be back. Obviously, last season didn't quite end the way that any of us wanted it to, unless you're not a Bama fan. I was going to say unless you're a Clemson fan, but I think there's probably a lot of non-Clemson and non-Bama fans that were probably rooting for Clemson. But anyway, back at it again. Give it another shot, and I'm ready to get into it.
Yeah. So, like I said, I think we're going to start out by just talking about, since this is the first episode and we're going into a new season, by just sort of going through the team kind of position, spending a couple minutes on each position, and then kind of talking about the offense and defense as a whole, and then we'll move on to talking about FSU specifically. So I don't know, what do you want to start with?
Let's just let's do the offense first. I say we just get into the quarterback first and then work from there.
All right. Well, for once, Alabama doesn't, as much as some Gumps tend to get enamored with backup quarterbacks, particularly one as good as Tua is. But we finally do not have a quarterback competition. We have an entrenched starter in Jalen Hurts, who, of course, was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year last year. Remained a capable runner and decision maker in the option game for the entire season, but definitely struggled some down the stretch as a passer. And I think obviously one of the big questions for the whole season for Alabama, and one that will really kind of determine how far they can go, is how has Jalen progressed as a passer? And that is something where, we saw some good things at A-Day, and there have been some, the general talk from camp is that he has been improved in some aspects, but we're just really not going to know until Saturday at the earliest, I guess.
Yeah, I think that we're all sort of, I think if there's one thing that I'm hoping that improves is just his clock. And I just hope that he makes quicker decisions, that he gets the ball out sooner. He's not gonna be like, I don't think he's gonna be. I'm not expecting him to be some sort of superstar. I'm not expecting a sea change from year 1 to year 2. But if he's out there getting the ball out sooner, making quicker decisions, he's a pretty accurate thrower. So if you can sort of couple those two things together, I think that he's going to have a lot of opportunities in the passing game. So that's the number one thing that I'm looking for this year.
Right. And that's, like that's exactly the thing for me is if all he improves on, he doesn't have to become to extend the connection with a Patriots guy coming in an offensive coordinator. He doesn't have to become Tom Brady. He doesn't have to become a really advanced quarterback in terms of making reads and hitting the really difficult throws. But if he can just improve the timing and get balls out so that he's not, the receivers aren't waiting on the ball, that he's not missing guys downfield. If he can consistently hit open receivers down the field, which I think Alabama's going to have plenty of, then that's huge for Alabama this season. That's and if it's anything more than that, then they could be basically unstoppable on offense.
Yeah. I guess the last thing I would say about the quarterback position is just if Jalen was to get hurt, what kind of drop off is fair to expect? Like how, so you have some years as a team, it's like you look at your quarterback situation, you go, man, like if our quarterback gets hurt, we're screwed. And there's other years where it's like, well, after our quarterback gets hurt, obviously there's going to be a drop off because there's a reason this guy's a starter. There's a reason this guy's the starter and the other guy's the backup. But we still should be able to keep the offense resembling in some way what they were, with the other quarterback. So with the starter. So if I'll put it to you this way: if on a scale of 1 to 10, if 1 is the best shape you can be in with the backup, and 10 is the worst shape you can be in with the backup, where would you put Alabama on that scale? And obviously it's hard because he's such an unknown.
Right. I'm going to be optimistic and say like a low 3, high 4. I think, it sort of depends where it comes in. Like if Jalen gets hurt, like smack in the middle of FSU, that's really bad.
Yeah.
If it's, against, God, who do they play next week? Is it like Fresno State or somebody like that?
Yeah.
If it happens like early in that game and, Tua gets to sort of get some game reps against lesser opponents before working into more challenging things, then I think you start to feel better because, as much as a lot of us have been annoyed by the Gumps, stamping their feet for Tua this offseason, he really is a special talent, and he is certainly far more advanced as a passer at this stage than Jalen was a year ago. So I think there's reason for optimism. I mean, you do lose some things in terms of, Tua is a fine runner, but he's not Jalen in that aspect. And I don't think it's reasonable to expect that he's going to be the same kind of excellent option quarterback that Jalen is. So you lose some things, and that's, this is sort of a side point, but that's, as much as we hope Jalen improves as a passer this season, I hope they don't tone down the option runs too much because he's so good at that, and it's such a weapon for this offense that I really hope that they keep that as a major focal point. But anyway, the point is that I really do think Tua is a special talent. And so I think if he has time to get a little seasoning, I think there's reason to be hopeful that the offense would still be pretty solid and could still do a lot of the same things that they expect to do in the passing game with Jalen, could still do those things with Tua in there.
Okay. I like that. So it's not quite, So it's not quite a 2010 Greg McElroy to AJ McCarron situation, but it's also not a situation like last year after everybody transferred out, where if Jalen got hurt, it was like, you're in big trouble. Although I guess Cooper was there all year, so maybe I shouldn't say that. But
yeah,
a situation though where you got nobody left. I would tend to agree with that. Should we go to? You want to go receiver, or running back next?
Let's do running back real quick because I think we can sort of knock that out.
Yep.
And I think the reason that is that they're going to be really, really good. There's no reason I think to expect either Damian or Bo to be, as long as they stay healthy, to be worse than they were last year, and they were both excellent last year.
Yep.
Josh Jacobs, hopefully, it doesn't look like he's going to play this game, but he was one of the most elusive backs in the country last year and was really good as a receiver. And then they've got Najee Harris coming in, who looks to be it's hard to say how much he's going to contribute just because there's only one football, and you've got Jalen and 3 older, very, very capable running backs. But I think Saban himself has said that he expects him to contribute this game. But the depth, the talent at this position is really incredible. And
I have two questions related to the running backs, both specifically related to Bo. I guess the first is, and that probably dovetails with a larger question about the running back rotation, is what percentage of the carries is Bo going to get? This is going to change game to game, but in a game where, in a game against a really good opponent, how many carries is Bo going to get, percentage-wise, compared to the other guys? If Bo is if everybody is the type of player that we think they're going to be,
right?
Because that's the one thing I've been wrestling with. I want it to be a lot.
Yeah, I'm gonna say 50% of them.
See, that's my big thing: majority or plurality. Where does he?
Yeah.
And I would want it to be closer to. I would want it to be more on the majority side than the plurality side, because
Right.
I just think that Bout. Now obviously there are injury concerns, so he has to be healthy, and you don't want to wear him down.
Right.
But as good as those other guys are, I think Bout, like, because my other question was this: Bout, all things considered, both considering Bo's ability, both and considering the offensive line and the situation that the offense is in, not necessarily from a numbers and production standpoint, but what are the chances that Bout has the best season of any running back under Saban, just based on quality of play? I guess the first question would be to say who was the best. Who's the best right now?
I think you got to give it to Derek, right?
Probably
Yeah.
Derek or 2011 Trent.
Yeah. And so
can Bout perform more impressively than those guys?
I think obviously we can say almost for certain that he's not going to match the production of even Trent in 2011,
exactly,
because way more carries to go around.
Exactly. But we all agree that, like, as good as those guys were, there is room to be better than them. This isn't like a 2005 Reggie Bush situation where the guy basically maxed out as good as you can be at a position. Like, you can, right. They can be exceeded just on quality of play.
Yeah. I think he'll have chances to. I honestly sort of expect this because, well, I don't know. I guess that in some sense makes Henry in 2015 more impressive, but that offensive line, which is weird because they won that award for being the best offensive line in the country.
Right.
Best offensive line.
Absolutely not.
That offensive line, gave up a lot of negative plays, and there were times when Henry was kind of making something on his own that year. I think Bo's going to have better blockers out in front of him, which might tend to make him look more impressive at times. I don't know. I guess the question here becomes, like, how do you compare Bo and Derek as players? Like, what I mean, because obviously in a first look sense, they're very similar players, right? They're both huge. They're both powerful. They both have incredible top end speed for guys their size. So what do you see as the differences between what Bo is now and what Derek was then?
Well, I actually personally, I think, and I'm granted there's not a lot of carries for me to base this off of, but I think that Bo is better than Derek in a number of areas. I think his top end speed is a little bit higher than what Derek's top end speed was. I think he runs a little bit more powerfully than Derek did.
Derek was a very upright runner, which tended even as strong as he was, he could be ankle tackled pretty easily.
And that got better. That was something that Derek improved on in his junior year, probably more so than we anticipated that he would, certainly more so than I anticipated that he would. But he still was not an elite between the tackles runner that I think somebody like Bo could be, because I just think that Bo is such a powerful runner and he has such an incredible burst that I think that he is going to, that on between the tackles place, I think he can get into the second level more consistently than Derek could, or at least that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, I can see that. I guess my best answer to the overall question of can he be more impressive is we'll see.
Yeah, excited though.
Right, yeah, and but the point is the potential is there, which you're not going to say about every back. Like, Derek wasn't perfect that season, but he was very. And the thing that was so impressive was that he improved in a lot of ways, like you were alluding to with the way he ran. He improved in a lot of ways that we didn't expect him to improve going into that season. But yeah, no, I definitely think Bo's got a shot.
Yeah, I'm excited. Receivers?
Yeah. It's sort of interesting because I feel so, and I think a lot of people are really high on this position, and I certainly am too, but you think about that there's really outside of Calvin, there's very little proven production. We're mostly going off potential. I think there's plenty of reason to be excited about that potential in terms of both, fingers crossed that Robert Foster finally puts it together. And then you've got these 3 absolute stud freshmen in Devontae Smith and Ruggs and Jerry Jeudy. But I guess how the season goes for them, I think, depends as much or more on Jalen's development and on how they structure the offense than on the actual abilities of the guys you have there.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because I was going to say, the first thing that I want to see is I want to see Calvin have a huge year. I think that's of any guy that I want to really see have an amazing year on this entire team, offense and defense. I want to see Calvin become the player that we know he can be from a tool standpoint. We know that Calvin has the ability to be one of the 5 best wide receivers in the country. I think it's time to put that. I hope that his final year here is when that is completely realized. But like you said, that's not necessarily on Calvin, right? It's more on Jalen. It's more on the structure of the offense than on Calvin. The guy I'm most curious about though is Robert Foster. I honestly have no idea what to expect. Right. Last year is such a mystery to me as far as why he wasn't able to be more productive, whether that was something that he wasn't doing right or that they just didn't feel like there was opportunities to get him in, or whether it was the offense, or I'm not sure. But it's not even just that he wasn't productive, it's that he really wasn't even on the field that much.
Yeah. It's, you can see that they're just, in terms of the way they structured the offense and in terms of Jalen's ability, there just weren't a whole lot of catches to go around last season. You can see a situation where he would have been a very good player last year and just not shown for it because, really the only wide receivers who had much to show in terms of stats last year were Calvin and Ardarius. And even, I didn't really feel like Calvin was worse as a player last year than he was his season. It's just it was, 1, there weren't enough catches to go around, and 2, it was very clear that Jalen was more comfortable throwing to Ardarius than he was to Calvin.
Right.
And it's just so weird with Robert Foster because if you remember, he was a starting wide receiver in 2015.
And looked really good earlier in the year, had a really nice game against Wisconsin, caught a touchdown pass. Yeah.
Yeah, and got obviously he got hurt, and that's why Calvin came in. But then, you figure if he was starting coming into 2015, then there would be an opportunity for him last year. But it was pretty much he never saw the field. It was Calvin and Ardarius and Garrett Dieter all the time. There was he just really didn't have a role, and it's you've seen from the little bit of playing time he got in 2015, from his performance in 8A this year, where he caught a couple of long, or at least one long touchdown and looked pretty good on the whole. He's obviously he was a huge recruit coming out of high school. He's obviously as talented a guy as you'll find, but his career up to this point is just sort of a mystery.
I'm really hoping, and maybe this was more a function of the quarterback and the offense than anything, but I'm really hoping that Alabama can get away from this thing they've done the last 2 years where the slot receiver is basically just a glorified blocker. Whether it was Mullaney 2 years ago or Dieter last year, there were a lot of positive plays to be made out of throwing to your slot receiver. And I like to see Alabama get back to that point, which maybe means, Cam Sims right now is listed as he's sort of an or with Jerry Jeudy in the slot. Cam, to me, is more of that blocking type. Now, some games that make sense, maybe for FSU, like we'll talk about, maybe it makes sense more to use more Cam Smith. But I'd like to see them get more production out of the slot in the receiving game. So I would say that. The other thing I would say, if just one of these freshmen can make a big impact and have a huge year, then the receiving core is probably pretty set.
Yeah.
It's just
and if by all probability, that's going to be Jeudy. But
yes.
if he has a big year, that's a very positive sign for this offense, I think.
Exactly.
I guess we can talk about tight ends a little bit. We do expect them to be a little more featured, which, OJ Howard's got to be banging somewhere.
It'd be nice to have the best one of the best tight ends in program history back in the year that you're going to feature the tight end more.
Right.
But.
They basically got three guys that it appears that they trust at this position. You've got Hale Hinges, who is sort of more of a traditional tight end, kind of an inline guy, not as much of a receiver. Miller Forrestall, who's a better receiver, not as much of an inline type of guy, more of an H-back. And then Irv Smith Jr., who just sort of came out of nowhere this offseason and is being touted by a lot of people as the best overall tight end in the program, and a guy who can be kind of like OJ Howard. Obviously, he doesn't, not a lot of guys have OJ's sheer talent, but be that kind of guy who is capable as both a blocker and a receiver. And obviously, this is one of the things that we're interested to see this season. Obviously, it's when you talk about bringing in Brian Dable from the Patriots, one of the things, the immediately thing that people say is like, oh, what are you going to do with the tight ends? But it's going to be interesting to see what they do with the tight ends, I guess.
I'm very excited about Irv Smith, just mainly because from everything we've heard, and it's impossible to really know for sure what's going on, and maybe this is a function of the fact that Miller Forrestall has just had a really bad offseason, but it seems what we've heard is that Irv Smith really stepped up and came out of nowhere and stole that job based on his own individual performance. And I'm very excited for a guy that does that. And I mean, it's not even a dual starter.
We can talk about a bit when we get to the offensive line with because it's sort of been a similar story with Jedrick Wills at right tackle.
And in this case, it's not even like I was expecting like an or situation at H-back with Smith and Forrestall. The fact that Smith is the number one by himself is very encouraging to me as far as him stepping up, showing them enough to really earn that role. And I'm excited to see what he can bring to the table.
Right. So let's move on to the offensive line real quick. I don't think we need to say too much about the whole left side because I think we really know what to expect from those guys. Jonah Williams is obviously fantastic. He was incredible as a freshman. I am a staunch Cam Robinson defender. I think Alabama fans give him way more crap than he deserved. But I don't think it's at all incorrect to say that Jonah Williams was the best offensive lineman last year.
No, not at all.
And then, so I think I expect him to be rock solid. Ross Pierschbaker continues to sort of be the weak link from a talent standpoint. He's just not the type of prospect that most of the other guys are. But this is his third year as a starter, and he's now a redshirt junior. So he's one of those guys that's just going to get beat sometimes against really talented interior guys like Florida State has, for instance. But I expect him to be solid. He's not. I don't think he's going to be a liability. Bradley Bozeman.
Just do what you did last year.
Yeah, exactly. If he has the exact same season, that's a huge success because he was a really pleasant surprise last year, stepping in. And, as good of a player as Ryan Kelly was, to just kind of come in and have no drop-off from Kelly. Lester Cotton, we'll see.
I'm excited about Lester Cotton. We know we like him from a talent standpoint, right? Yeah. We have no idea what happened last year. It still remains a pretty big mystery as far as when was that? After LSU when he got sat down?
Replaced by Corin Curvin.
By Corin Curvin. But we know that he's very physically gifted offensive lineman. So hopefully him taking that job hopefully means that, again, it's another guy whose potential is sort of fully realized and he's ready to step in and play up to that potential.
Right.
Now, right tackle, I don't really know.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. So, the depth chart lists it's an or between Matt Womack and Jedrick Wills. I'm choosing to be optimistic about this because I think, Womack had basically, locked down the position right from the beginning of the spring. And usually that's a pretty good sign if a guy coming in and there's a battle like that and the guy just kind of steals it right away. And Womack is not, my understanding, is not sort of the most athletic guy, not the most high upside guy, but he's big, he's extremely strong, he's kind of a mean and physical in the run game guy, which is something that you definitely want in a right tackle. The impression I had was that he had kind of locked that job down, and maybe he wasn't going to be, a really, best in the country type player, but going to be pretty solid. And then here comes Jedrick Wills, who wasn't even here in the spring, is a true freshman, was not the most touted lineman in this class. That was Alex Leatherwood, and has just come in and apparently blown people away. They say he's just incredibly athletic, and really powerful. And there's you can kind of look at this two different ways. That I look at it as, if a player comes in, a true freshman comes in without having been there in the spring and immediately pushes for a starting job, that usually says something pretty incredible about that player, regardless of this is Alabama. For a true freshman to come in the fall and do something like that, regardless of who was supposed to be ahead of him, that usually says incredible. I mean, who was the last player to do that? Minka, right? Who's now, one of the best defensive backs in the country.
Exactly. Yeah, I think exactly. I think, and I mean, if he's pushed this hard after only being on campus for a couple months, I mean, that's pretty impressive in its own right. And listening to Saban talk, I get the sense that Saban wants him to win that job.
Right.
And I also get the feeling, and we'll talk more about this when we do the FSU preview, but they're both going to play.
Same. Yeah, that's what I would think.
My guess is Womack starts, gets a couple series, and then we'll probably see Wills.
Yeah, that's what I would think.
Something to that effect. Defense?
Yep. So the defensive line, I think, is the big. There are questions about the linebackers and the defensive backs, but the big, the real question about what the potential of this defense can be is with the defensive line, because you just lost so much talent from last year. And not only, obviously this is Alabama, there are talented players waiting in the wings, but right now it's just hard to project whether or not there are guys on this team who can be the kind of disruptive players that they had, and incredible players that they had last year.
And just to start it off, last year they got away with essentially a 4-man rotation at defensive line because they had Ryan Anderson and Tim Williams, basically both outside linebacker positions basically being able to play defensive end. This year they probably won't have that luxury. So there's a very good chance that they need to go back to having a 5-man rotation like they had the year before. And you look at it, now, Deron Payne, obviously you really like him at the top. He could be as good as any defensive tackle in the entire country. So that's set.
Yep.
Then you've got Deshaun Hand. We'll get back to Hand in a minute. Then you've probably got Raekwon Davis. I don't know if you're going to have Raekwon Davis this week, but you're going to have Raekwon Davis at some point locked in probably to that 3rd spot. And then after Raekwon Davis, I don't really know. You've got Frazier and you've got Johnny Dwight as far as returning guys, and then you've got the freshmen. Are 2 of those guys going to be able to step up and play and be playable guys for Alabama on even like a 20 snaps or 25 snaps per game basis? I don't know. I really don't know. And it's been a while since Alabama's had this sort of issue at defensive line.
Yeah. And it's just like, in terms of, like, if this were 2011, I would feel fine about this defensive line because they've got plenty of size. Right. Like, if they were going to be in 3-4 base greater than 50% of the time, and all they needed these guys to do is 2-gap, well, throw Hand, throw Payne, throw Davis or Frazier out there, and you'll feel fine about these guys. But as much as they play, and maybe that's something they do more this year. Maybe they do a little more 2-gapping this year and kind of expect the linebackers to be creating a little more havoc themselves, because that's just kind of the guys you have. But I think for this line and this front seven as a whole to be anything, and it's not going to be as good as either of the past 2 years.
No.
But determining how high their ceiling is really depends on if you need some combination, preferably more than one, of Deshaun Hand, Quinnen Williams, who's a redshirt freshman, and Isaiah Buggs, who's a JUCO guy. You need some combination of those three guys to step up and really be. They don't have to be Jonathan Allen, but they need to be that type of player where they can be versatile, where you can line them up at 3-tech and expect them to get pressure inside, where they can play defensive end. And you need those guys to be disruptive and be making tackles for loss and not just be run stoppers who are clogging up the line.
We need to see, I think it all starts with Deshaun Hand and needing him to really live up to his potential. You want to see weekly splash plays from him, as far as, like you said, making plays in the backfield, getting penetration, all of that stuff. If Deshaun Hand can be like a really, really, really good player for them, then the dynamic sort of changes, because then you've got two really good guys on that defensive line, and then everything else can hopefully follow suit. But if Deshaun Hand is a disappointment, and I think as amazing as the defense was last year, I think he was one of the weak links. I don't really think that he made the jump from sophomore year to junior year that a lot of us expected him to make. And he got a lot of playing time because he was probably the fourth guy in that 4-man rotation.
And he just didn't really do a whole lot.
Right. That's kind of how I saw it.
This just popped up on Twitter, by the way. This is just a headline, but this Saban's radio show is on, and he said, well, now I can't find it in the actual article itself. The blurb says that he said that Raekwon and Josh Jacobs both practiced.
Really?
Yeah.
Having Raekwon would be nice. I don't know. I don't know if he's ready to play a full complement of snaps, but even if they can just have him for 25 snaps or 20 snaps or something, that would be such a huge
The more guys you can have that can play good snaps, the better off you are.
Yeah, that would be really nice. Want to go to linebackers? Let's start with the outside guys really quick.
Yeah. I think they feel good about Christian Miller. I feel good about Christian Miller. He's apparently had a great offseason. He's a pretty high upside guy as a pass rusher. I am a little worried about him for FSU because he's had a hamstring issue. I think he's been pretty much a full participant in practice this week, but you do worry for a guy that relies on his speed, that he's really a dedicated pass rusher and that relies on his speed, that he can maybe be a little bit limited. But I feel good about him as sort of their primary guy. He's probably not the freak that Tim Williams was, but I think he can be a really solid pass rusher. Anthony Jennings, I guess I sort of look at him like I looked at Ryan Anderson prior to late 2015. A guy who can kind of play defensive end and is a really stout guy that's going to set the edge well. Yeah. And maybe give you a little bit as a rusher, but that you're not expecting to really contribute a whole lot to the pass rush. Now, obviously, Ryan ended up being way better than that, and being an incredible player in a lot of different ways. But if you get any of that from Jennings, that's a bonus.
Even if he can be like Xavier Dixon or something, even if he could give you that sort of quality of play at outside linebacker, that would be a huge boost.
Yeah.
Or even like a Denzel Duval, if he could just be one of those guys, you know what I mean? That would be he doesn't need to be like a superstar pass rusher. He can just be like a solid anchor at the end of the line. I think that would be really helpful.
Terrell Lewis is the other guy that's gonna factor in a lot at the outside linebacker positions. Yeah. Obviously showed a fair amount in the spring and by all reports did so in the fall too. And he's a guy that's really impressive physically. He's like 6'5", 250. Got really, really long arms, pretty athletic. It's hard to know what to expect from him just because he hasn't really seen a lot of game action. You hope that with his size and length that he can sort of be a a guy who can hold the edge on standard downs that they can, that's not just going to be a passing downs guy. But I'm gonna be cautiously optimistic about him. I think he's gonna be a surprise to some people.
Well, I would go as far to say, and I'm curious whether you agree with me or not, looking at all those guys at the outside linebacker positions, to me, in very limited playing time last year, and mostly at the end of games when it wasn't all the starters in, I thought that Terrell Lewis looked the most impressive in actual game action. I was consistently impressed with him coming in late at the end of games and really playing well, whether it's against the run or mostly affecting the quarterback. I thought that he looked really good, even better than Christian Miller, I thought.
Yeah.
Christian Miller got more meaningful snaps probably last year than Terrell Lewis, but I thought that in Terrell Lewis' snaps, I thought he had more snap-to-snap production.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And certainly I think that reflects I would sort of like it to be. I do think Lewis is the highest upside guy if we're talking about in terms of the outside linebackers. But we'll see. I think he's listed as might be.
Wait.
I can't remember if he's listed as the Sam or the Jack. There's not as much difference between those positions these days as there used to be. They kind of get used in the same roles, as opposed to back in 2009 when you had the Jack was really more of a defensive end, and then the Sam was more of a true linebacker,
a stand-up linebacker. Yeah, they're listed as the Miller and Lewis are listed as Sams, but like you said, it's really sort of an interchangeable situation here.
So I feel good about Alabama's potential for pass rush when you're kind of in dime rabbits, right? Like when you can get Miller and Lewis, and you've got Hand out there, and you're either blitzing Rashaan Evans or moving him to outside linebacker. That's a really good combination of athletic guys, really high upside guys that you feel can get after it. It's just a matter of when you're in standard downs nickel, like you are so often against so many college offenses these days.
Can these guys set the edge consistently?
Yeah.
Especially Christian Miller.
Right. And then if they can't, they have to play more guys like Anthony Jennings, and they're relying on some heavier guys at defensive end. How much production are you going to get out of those guys when you're in standard down nickel?
Let me ask you. Sorry. You continue.
No,
I was just going to say. Let me just ask you a really quick question. First snap, 1st and 10 Saturday for the defense. Let's say that they're in nickel. What's the 4 across the defensive line? Let's say
obviously Hand and Payne.
Hand and Payne, definitely. Let's say that Raekwon's not in there. Even if he plays, let's say he doesn't start.
Okay.
Christian Miller's listed as a starter, but is he going to can he play on 1st and 10? Can you put him in on 1st and 10 tomorrow like that?
I don't know.
Maybe you put Payne at 1 tack, Frazier 3 tack, slide Hand to the outside, and then play Anthony Jennings on the other end, something like that.
I think if Raekwon's not out there, I think that's probably what you're looking at.
Yeah. Very interested to see on Saturday how many standard downs Christian Miller can play, and if he does get in on standard downs, how he fares. As sort of because if he can play on standard downs, that would be a huge boost to Alabama as far as the production that they can get.
Lewis is playing on standard downs. I think that's a very good sign for Alabama.
Yes, both of them, both Miller and Lewis, or at least one of them. If at least one of them can step up and be playable on standard downs, they'd be ahead of the game there. Inside linebackers, Sean Deion Hamilton, not a lot to say. Seems like he's 100%. He's a great player. Evans is the more interesting case.
And they're going to move him around a bit. Obviously, there's been reports that he's lining up at outside linebacker in some rushing packages, which is good because you hope that as however, he's been an inside linebacker that the coaching staff hasn't lost sight of, that he is a really gifted pass. He's an incredibly fast guy, and he's that he really started his career as a pass rusher, and that's what he's really comfortable doing. So it's good to see that they're still working him in at that. I think I've said this on Twitter before, but I was sort of hoping going into the offseason that they would move him back to outside
and then
linebacker.
You play Mac next to Sean Dion.
Mac Wilson, or now Dylan Moses apparently he's apparently been coming in. But the fact that he's just sort of locked down that job, and people all off season, that have been at practice and have sources or whatever have been saying, "Oh, Rashaan Evans looks great. Rashaan Evans has been doing awesome. He's really locked down that job. He's a leader. He's been making plays all over the field." They certainly looked out of position at inside linebacker last year when he was playing late. He was not good at taking on and shedding blocks. He really wasn't good at reading the inside run game. His hips were stiff in coverage. But if he has gotten to the point where, he doesn't have to be Reuben Foster, but like if he's gotten to the point where he has good inside linebacker skills, he is an absolute freak athletically.
Yeah.
So if he's improved those skills, then I think, you don't get better by losing Reuben Foster. But I would feel extremely good about this inside linebacker duo if he's really improved on those skills like he seems to have. Yeah.
Corner.
So
we like one of the corners.
Yeah. I think you feel good about Averett. He really was solid down the stretch last season. Maybe not the surest tackler in the world, or as great in run support as some guys they've had, but a very, very good and solid cover guy, someone that you feel comfortable kind of manning the boundary. We'll see at the other spot. Obviously, Trayvon Diggs is a very talented player, and if he's still at that spot next year, I would feel really good about him, because when Saban takes an interest, he's one of those guys. He's like a Cyrus Jones that Saban takes an interest in you as a defensive back, and those guys always tend to turn out well. But
right away, as much as what's going to happen right away.
And we will see.
It reminds me a lot of 2013 with Averett playing the role of Dion Blue. And then the other corner spot was really sort of in flux, and eventually it was Cyrus Jones that ended up being that guy. Yeah. And you look at Trayvon as sort of like a Cyrus Jones. Corner that year was kind of Alabama's undoing in a sense, so hopefully there's not a repeat of that same history. But I see it as very similar to that, to the point where that defense.
And I think Averett's a better player than Blue is for entrance, and I think Trayvon's upside is higher than Cyrus is.
Probably so. That's probably fair. Yeah, Averett is probably a little. I liked Blue, but he was certainly a limited player. I guess he didn't even get drafted, so it's probably fair to say that Averett is better. But they're both older guys, solid. Not like we're not talking about any D Milners or anything out there, or Kareem Jacksons or anything, but solid guys who man the other side, and then such a uncertainty at the other spot. But we'll see there. This star situation, Tony Brown on the depth chart is listed as the star. We don't really know if Tony Brown is going to play the star in nickel. We want Tony Brown to play the star in nickel. Yeah,
because we want Minkah Fitzpatrick at I've never understood the guy who plays the role that Minkah plays when he's at safety has consistently been listed on Saban's depth. This is a complete tangent, but has consistently been listed on Saban's depth charts as strong safety. And then they've listed guys like Ronnie Harrison and Landon Collins as free safety. I just don't get, because it completely doesn't mesh with your sort of traditional way you think about the types of players and roles at those positions. Anyway,
Robert Lester was a free safety, I think, on the depth chart, which I don't think of Robert Lester at all as having the skills of a free safety. So
but you want Minkah's a fantastic cover guy, and you want him back there patrolling the back end, and you want him with his eyes facing the quarterback because that's when he's at his best. Obviously he's incredible at star, but I don't know. I wish he could just play safety, and but I don't know. I feel good about Ronnie. We'll see about Hootie Jones. He always seemed like he was kind of limited athletically to me.
Me too.
So I don't know how great I feel about having Ronnie and Hootie as your two safeties in nickel.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Saban's said a bunch of really complimentary things about Hootie this offseason. So, maybe he's stepped up, and we'll see.
One final question on the defense before we quickly get to the specialists. Because this is something I was thinking about when you were talking about Rashaan Evans and talking about him being like a leader and everything. Does Alabama have does the defense have like one of those alpha dogs this year that they've had, say, with Rolando McClain or Reuben Foster? I'm not sure if they have, or even Landon Collins, like Reuben Foster, Landon Collins, Rolando McClain. Like, does this team have one of those guys? Ronnie, maybe.
Yeah, I think that they may not have one guy who is like the guy.
Yeah, because Minka's a really good leader, but I don't know he's not like that kind of leader, though. I don't know if he has the sort of presence in the room that a guy like Rolando McClain or Landon Collins or Reuben Foster probably had.
Right. I think you're going to get some combination of that from Minka, from Ronnie, and from Rashaan. There was a really, really good piece about how, guys were talking about how Rashaan had was kind of consciously trying to step into Reuben's role, both as sort of the leader and the motivator, and also being a guy who like cuts up and jokes a lot. So I think, I don't know. I don't want to have a lot of certainty as to like where that's going to come from exactly, but I'm not too worried about it not being there.
Yeah, well, and they've had years where they haven't necessarily had that guy, where they've definitely had like leaders, but they haven't had like a Rolando McClain or a Landon Collins necessarily, like in like the 2012 team. You know what I mean? Like maybe 2012 team, you look at, maybe it was like Nico Johnson was maybe the leader on that defense, or CJ partly too, but more so the next year. And it didn't really matter. You know what I mean? They had a number of guys in leadership roles who really helped out, but they didn't have like one guy, which is okay. But that was just something I was thinking about the other day, because it is nice to have one of those guys.
Okay, I think we'll cover the specialists real quick and then try to move into FSU.
FSU, yes.
We've done what we
way too long on this.
Way too long.
Yeah.
Specialists, JK is amazing. Not much to be said there in terms of punting. We'll see at the return positions. I feel okay. You're not sure exactly who it's going to be, but I think I'm not pessimistic about it, I guess is the best way of putting it. Kicking will be interesting. Although I don't know. I think I've heard some people like, it seems like what they're going to do is have Papanastos kick short field goals and JK kick long ones, which the only reason I don't feel okay about that was that, Papanastos is not exactly impressed in what we've seen of him. But I don't necessarily feel bad about having two kickers, because they did that before and it was fine. Like
Jeremy Shelley and Kate Foster.
Yeah. Like as long as they can consistently hit short field goals.
Right.
It was like inside 35.
35. Exactly what I was at, 35 and in. Make all the kicks 35 and in. I don't know if they're going to do that, but if they could, that's fine.
Yeah. That's all I want. Give me
Jeremy Shelley. Give me like a 2012 Jeremy Shelley.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't know if we're going to get that, but
yeah, we will see. But apparently they were good in the second scrimmage. is all I've got there.
We'll see. There's almost no point in even speculating because it's just like, you know.
Yeah, they're either going to do it or they're not.
Right. And it could be really, really, really bad, or it could be okay. And fingers crossed.
As long as it's okay.
As long as it's okay. We're not even asking for like Daniel Carlson. We're just asking for like we're not asking for Daniel Carlson, we're just asking for Jeremy Shelley, which sort of tells you where we are in terms of expectations and what we're asking for. So anyways, FSU.
I don't know if you're watching this, but we're into the second quarter and Indiana's up 7-3 on Ohio State.
Really? I'm not watching.
Been a fat load of nothing on offense so far.
Okay. Well, that's sort of interesting as far as what to expect from some of these.
Apparently, turning 30 has not helped JT Barrett.
It is unbelievable that he's still there.
Yeah. Anyway, Florida State.
He was like on like the 2017 that played LSU in the national championship, which is just crazy to me.
Yeah, I think he was Todd Beckman's backup.
Somebody should look into this. All right. Okay, FSU. Let's just do this by sides of the ball, I think.
Yeah. Which side do you want to start with?
Let's do the Florida. Considering we were just talking about the defense, let's stick with that and let's do the Florida State offense against the Alabama defense.
Okay.
Let's start with Francois.
Yeah.
You were watching the Michigan game I think it was last night. What are your impressions of him? Oh, also, just before we get into this, not to plug another podcast, but we both listened to Bud Elliott of Tomahawk Nation. We both listened to his Nolecast. He did a podcast on each position grouping. It is very good. If you want to know anything you want to know about the entire FSU roster, top to bottom, I would suggest going there and just giving those a quick listen. And a lot of the knowledge probably that we're going to relate to you guys about Florida State was very influenced by what we learned there. So it's very good, very high quality stuff.
Yeah. So Francois, it feels to me like there's a segment of the FSU fan base that feels like Francois was Jameis Winston with a bad offensive line. He's not that.
No.
As much crap as the Florida State offensive line got last season, and it was deserved. Like, they were not good.
Right.
He didn't help them out. He held the ball a really long time. It's a tough offense because Jimbo expects so much out of his quarterbacks, and he really does run a pro-style passing game. So they have to make multiple pro-style reads every throw because Jimbo doesn't believe in run-pass options and running quarterbacks and newfangled cheat and shit like that. And he is not the quickest at making those reads, or at least he wasn't last year.
Yeah.
And so that hurt them some. He's got his arm's huge.
He has a great arm. He has a really, really, really great arm.
Yeah. And he's obviously tough as nails because he took some huge shots last year and just kept getting up and coming back. He in terms of running ability, like he can, if you leave a big chunk of the field open, he can scoot for a first down, but he's not
similar to Jameis, I think, in that very specific regard in terms of his running ability. It's not always pretty. He can get the yards if it's there in front of him, but it's not something that he's necessarily going to look to do because he doesn't have so he doesn't have the ground ability to do that.
Yeah, I saw them run one zone read against Michigan, and he made the right read. Like the defense had been crashed, so he made the right read. He
got ran down.
Yeah, and he was trying to make it to the outside and realized he wasn't going to make it and just slid. Which was a good decision.
So let's sort of take that. I don't want to break down every position on Florida State. So instead, let's sort of take what we know about Francois. How are they going to attack the Alabama defense, do we think? The running backs, it looks like we're going to see a lot of Jacquez Patrick, bigger guy between the tackles, decent player, but not somebody that scares you.
Yeah,
don't know how much.
Not the kind of guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. He doesn't. I guess he's just not the kind of back that scares you as an Alabama. Not that in the sense that very few backs scare you as an Alabama fan, but he's certainly not. He's not a home run hitter. He's a big dude. He's a powerful dude. But it's not like if you miss one gap assign, if your gap discipline breaks down on one play, he's gonna take it to the house. He's not that type of guy.
Akers, if he was further along, that's the kind of guy who you would be more worried about giving you fits. But it doesn't seem like he's certainly not the starter. It doesn't seem like he's necessarily even going to play a ton on Saturday. He might even be. He's listed as the second back, but I know that people have talked about Rasul possibly really being the second back and Akers being more the third back. So I'm not really sure exactly how much we're going to see of Akers. They're certainly going to try to run the ball some. I think that Patrick being more of a slower between the tackles runner fits in better as far as, or he's not necessarily the kind of guy that's going to be able to take advantage of what might be sort of not quite as good an Alabama defensive line.
Right.
Because the one thing that the Alabama defensive line is not lacking is size. I mean, there is a lot of size there with whether it's Frazier or Raekwon or obviously Deron Payne in the middle. So I'm not necessarily sure I'm super worried still about running between the tackles. I know the FSU guards are good, but that doesn't scare me too much.
Yeah. They're good. They're not like they're Dickerson's really, assuming Dickerson is fully healthy. He had an ACL last year. He's the left guard. He's a pretty good player.
Right.
But this is not. Alabama has faced much better offensive lines than this in recent years.
As a sort of by comparison here, I'm not necessarily sure either guard is all that much better than Rush Pierce-Baker.
No, I wouldn't say they are.
They're like solid players, right? I mean, they're not like so it doesn't take you to a point where it's like, well, they're just going to maul you up front. I don't think we're going to see that. No. So this is the kind of offensive line that an Alabama team of the past couple of years would destroy. The Alabama defensive line of this year is not going to destroy them, but hopefully they can do enough not to open up lots of running lanes.
Right. I said to someone last night that if you had the 2016 or even the 2015 Alabama defensive front against, or the line and the outside linebackers against this team, I'd be taking Alabama by 20 plus.
Yeah.
Because they're just, they wouldn't be able to run the ball. Like this is the kind of offensive line that Alabama's front in the past 2 years would have just annihilated.
Right. But it's different this year, though.
Yeah.
Now they're going to throw the ball. They're probably going to throw the ball a lot. They're probably going to try to throw the ball deep. They have two big targets on the outside. Mm-hmm. But how much do those guys scare you? The first guy, who apparently is the most physically gifted, Keith Gavin, not much of a. He doesn't have any career receptions at Florida State, I believe.
The guys that I expect to see more of. Auden Tate is a big dude,
but limited physically, though, right? Not fast. Yeah. He won't run away from you. He doesn't really have the bend to come clean in and out of his breaks. Yeah. So it's more of just like a. I mean, you're going to see some fade. You see some fades, some stop fades to him.
Yeah.
And you get him. I mean, he is listed as.
I've got the depth chart.
6'5". So he's a big guy.
Yeah. 6'5", 225, and not Julio athletically.
No. Naquan Murray, probably their best wide receiver.
Yeah, but he's not as big of a dude, right?
Right, he's only 5'11". Yeah. And again, Francois, with his issues with accuracy, without a big enough target zone, like guys like Tate and Gavin offer him a bigger target zone. But I don't know if Murray is going to be able to offer him a big enough strike zone here, or if he's going to if it's tight coverage, which hopefully it is in the middle of the Alabama defense, that Francois is going to be able to consistently fit the ball in there.
Yeah. And I guess, and this is more of a larger point that I guess we can talk about more when we're getting to the end, but it sort of fits in this part of the discussion. The only way I'm sort of getting more optimistic about this matchup as we get closer, and the reason for that is because I don't think they're going to run the ball. I will believe someone can run the ball consistently on Alabama when it happens.
When they do it, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think they're going to run the ball. And the only way I really see Florida State consistently moving the ball on this team is if it's just time after time they do what teams have done when they beat Alabama, which is, people think of the running quarterbacks making plays. And that's part of it. But, Francois is not that guy. It's just been when you've made throws downfield and receivers have just gone up and gotten them over the Alabama defensive back and done that consistently throughout the game.
Like the Ole Miss strategy.
Yeah. And between Francois not being the most accurate guy in the world and the receivers being not the most proven guys, not the most, having the combination of talent, of size and athleticism in any one guy. I just don't know how much I believe that Florida State's going to be able to do that consistently. Oh crap! Ohio State is about to hit. Oh no, not a pick six, but Indiana was in the red zone. Yeah.
I would like to see personally. I would like to see a lot of man coverage on Saturday. Mm-hmm. First of all, because I don't want to give Francois easy throws to open spots in a zone, because he doesn't deserve those gimmies. He needs to prove to you that he is going to be able to make accurate throws into smaller windows, and the only way you're going to make him prove that is to play a lot of man concepts. You have the advantage where you've got Tate on the outside. He's not going to be able to run away from you. And let's let the Gavin guy prove that he's going to be able to make plays too. I understand that he's the most physically gifted of the bunch, but you got to make him show that he's going to be able to do that in an actual game. And I feel very good about Alabama, the defense's ability to sort of have a good game against these guys. I really do. They don't have, it doesn't seem to me like they have any reliable playmakers on offense.
There's just not a skill player that really frightens you.
Right. And I look at it and I say, you know what? Akers and Gavin, they could be those guys. But are they going to be those guys in the first game?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think that Akers might not even play much in the first game. And Gavin will play, but I don't know if he's ready to be consistently productive, drive in and drive out in the way that you would have to be in order to be the sort of position player that would really strike fear in you as an Alabama fan. So I just don't, what usually beats this team, and this might not be an Alabama defense of the past couple of years, but it's still going to be a good defensive unit. And what typically beats these guys, what typically beats Alabama is not only a superstar quarterback, but superstar playmakers.
Yeah.
Whether it's Mike Williams with Clemson.
Mike Evans.
Mike Williams with Clemson, or Laquan Treadwell with Ole Miss. Yep. Those are the guys that that have really consistently given Alabama fits. In fact, in almost all of their losses, it's been a function of the fact that they've gone up against one of those guys, and that guy's had a huge game.
Yep.
I don't think that there is that guy on this Florida State defense that's going to be able to do that to you.
No.
Gavin possibly being the lone exception there.
Yeah.
If Gavin is suddenly this player that everybody thinks he can be, then that's one thing. But I'm also going to take my chances with the guy who doesn't have a single career catch, and it's not like he's a true freshman.
Right.
So I guess we'll see. But it wouldn't – I think that Alabama should be able to keep them under 20 if they don't turn the ball over.
Yeah, I would agree.
You want to flip it over?
Yep.
This is probably the more interesting discussion here as far as this is clearly the stronger of the two FSU units here is the defense.
For sure. The secondary is elite, and they have maybe the best player in the country in Derwin James. And then they've got an extremely strong I'm not as high on their ends in general. They've got some talented players.
You don't like Sweat? You don't like Sweat to be a potentially elite defensive end?
Potentially.
Yeah.
I believe he's going to do that when he does it. And even, we'll talk about this in a bit, but he's 6'5", 250 something.
Yeah.
He's basically like the same size as Terrell Lewis. Right. And particularly in the run game, I don't know how much I trust a guy that size to hold up against Alabama's tackles.
And he's going to have to, because because as we'll talk about in a second, the other defensive end they're going to have to take off the field on standard downs. So Sweat is going to have to hold up on standard downs here.
Burns is listed at like 230, and my understanding is that may be a bit of an inflation.
Right.
You cannot play a 230-pound defense, even if assuming he is 230. You can't play a 230-pound defensive end on standard downs against Alabama. They're going to run you over.
That's just free. Yeah, that's just free yards. They're just going to run right at that guy all game.
Anyway, their defensive tackles are extremely good, though. Naughty and
Christmas,
really, really talented, really disruptive guys. And as much as I have a lot of faith, honestly, that this Alabama offensive line is going to end up being a very good one.
Right.
But those two against this defensive interior, or the interior of this offensive line in the first game, could be a real challenge.
Yeah.
So
the question then is can Alabama take pressure off them when they run the ball and sort of run more to the perimeter?
Yeah. And I think that's something they're definitely going to look to do. I feel really good about, having tight ends and having, either Womack or Wills and Jonah Williams,
right,
blocking the defensive ends on the edge. I feel really good that Alabama can win that battle.
Yeah, the secret here probably is to try to really sort of, in the run game at least, is to try to really outflank Florida State, consistently get to the edges. That's obviously Bo's best attribute as a runner, is just on these sort of wide plays. I mean, he scored touchdowns on those plays against Washington in the playoff. He scored touchdowns on those plays against Clemson in the playoff. It's clearly where he's at his best, is sort of getting him off the edge, around the corner with a head of steam, when he's just he's almost impossible to tackle.
Yeah.
So now the linebackers, we'll get to the secondary because that's probably the most interesting aspect of the defense to touch. The linebackers, they've got Roderick Hoskins, who's a redshirt senior, who's sort of like a decent player, right? But he's not going to make a lot of splash plays for you.
The type of player he kind of reminds me of Trey DePriest.
Trey DePriest, Nico Johnson, those sorts of players, yeah.
The kind of guy who would have been a great NFL prospect at Mike linebacker 30 years ago.
30 years ago, yeah.
He's big, he's strong, he's great at taking on blocks, he's great at shedding blocks. If all of football were played in a phone booth these days, he'd be a fantastic player, but he just doesn't have the kind of athletic potential that ideally you want in a top-flight inside linebacker these days. Now, the other guy, Matthew Thomas, really is a very
more
athletic
player. Yeah.
Very good, definitely their highest talent linebacker. But, it's sort of, there's a whole lot of things going on there, which you don't even know about, and would take forever to talk about. But he's a redshirt senior also, and he didn't really earn much playing time until last year. And then he's had all these eligibility issues, and he's had them this camp, and he practiced today and maybe yesterday. But he's eligible and he could play, but it's an open question how much he is going to play. Because, even with a redshirt senior, and Jimbo said all this stuff about, it's like, oh, he knows the system, blah, blah, blah. But, how much do you want to play a guy who only got in the last day of game prep and missed most of camp?
Right. And I think that's particularly tough for a linebacker.
Right.
Maybe even more so than like a defensive lineman whose jobs aren't simple, but the linebacker, there's a lot more decisions that you need to make at that position, and a lot more where indecision can really cost you at the linebacker position. When you're at defensive end, you're firing off the ball right away anyways. You know your plan, your play. Linebacker tends to be a more read and react position. So whether he's ready without having simulated those run fits in practice, if he's ready to step in and be that guy, I guess what I would say is that if Florida State thinks he is that guy, then I would take my chances if I'm the opposition.
Yeah. And then on the flip side, if he doesn't play, then you're probably looking at Florida State playing a kid named Emmett Rice.
Right, who's very talented, apparently.
Yeah, very high upside, very fast. But he weighs 200 pounds.
Right. That's not really playable against Alabama. That's just not playable against. That's playable against some teams. That's just not playable against Alabama. They are just too big.
Nope, not in a classic. Like maybe if you were playing him as like functionally a nickel guy, like the way Ohio State used to use Darren Thomas, but not as a will linebacker against Alabama.
Yeah, I think the big question for these linebackers is whether or not, how much can they hide behind Noddy and Christmas, because I really do like if the Alabama offensive linemen can consistently release up to the second level in their zone schemes and get a body on these guys. I think they could be very successful in terms of blocking up the initial levels of the defense and springing their running backs into the second level. So really, most of it really comes
like if you can get a guy on Thomas. He is not a super strong dude. Like he can be blocked.
Right, and I think the same thing as Hoskins. Hoskins is stronger, but I'm not so sure that he's going to be able to shut a lot of blocks either. Which means that these guys can be.
If it's him versus Bradley Bozeman or Lester Cotton, like I feel
so. I think the question is just at Florida State is sort of in a situation, as good as their defense is, where their ability to be great on defense, at least in the first two levels, depends on the defensive tackles, Noddy and Christmas, being great.
Right.
If those guys aren't great, it potentially exposes a slightly weaker inside linebacker situation that they have. Yeah. And we also know that they might have some issue setting the edge on the outsides against the run. So the defensive tackles need to be excellent. Whether or not they can be excellent against Alabama remains to be seen. There certainly is some potentially favorable matchups for them, but that is a crucial matchup as far as how this game is going to play out. The interior of the Alabama offensive line against the interior of the Florida State defensive line.
Yeah. And, we said the path to victory for Florida State on the offense is the receivers making big plays on the outside. The path to victory, as great as their secondary is, and, we'll talk about those guys, right now, but the path to victory for them on defense is Noddy and Christmas just wrecking things on the inside.
Exactly.
Because if they're not doing that, then I don't care about the defensive backs. Alabama, if they're not doing that, Alabama's going to run the ball.
Exactly.
When Alabama runs the ball, they don't lose much.
Yeah, that's true. If Alabama has success running the ball, then it's not going to be much of a contest. So now the question is, now Florida State knows. Florida State is we know that they are going to try to make Alabama throw the ball, as they absolutely should, because this is a potential weak spot for Alabama.
It worked for Clemson. It might have worked for Washington if Alabama weren't just way, way, way better than they are.
Right. It almost worked for LSU. The truth of the matter is that what ultimately cost Alabama the national championship last year was an inability to throw the ball with any consistency.
Yep.
So, despite the reports that Jalen has improved as a passer, we are sure to see an FSU defensive game plan that is focused on A, stopping the run, and B, limiting Alabama's ability to throw the ball short, which is basically an extension of the run game. For those that don't know, and you probably do know this, Alabama threw way more passes behind the line of scrimmage than any team.
Any other team in the country. Yeah. Any other team like in the playoff era.
Yep. It was something like half, maybe like half of their throws were behind, or like 47% of their throws were behind the line of scrimmage. It was something almost hard to believe.
I think it was 40-something% behind the line of scrimmage, and then I don't even remember the number, but a massive number behind the line or within 5 yards.
Right. So the issue what ended up happening last year was that teams were just playing Alabama within 5, maybe within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. The field was just so small for the Alabama offense to operate in.
Yeah.
And then, if you look back at the Clemson game and you say, okay, Alabama can still win like that, but they can win like that if they have Bout. Because you need a guy, because when they're shrinking the field that much and committing so many bodies, you need a great player like Bout to break it down. When Bout went out, they didn't have any offense anymore because they didn't have that great player that was going to be able to operate in that kind of traffic. So it just goes to show you how much the margin for error decreases. So how does this relate to Florida State? Well, the first way it relates to Florida State is that the thinking or the conventional wisdom is that they are going to play Derwin James at star.
Yeah.
Now
Derwin James is maybe the best player in the country. He's extremely disruptive. He's 6'3", 215, can cover like a corner. He pancakes offensive tackles when he rushes the quarterback. Let's not shortchange him here. He's absolutely incredible. And if he's in the box playing star, he's gonna wreck things. There are gonna be several Alabama plays on Saturday night that are probably gonna be single-handedly blown up by him.
Right.
But the problem with playing him at star is
So if just to sort of piggyback what Carter said for a second, against a team that is so run and RPO folks and is basically going to play within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, the star essentially becomes the most important player on the defense because he is in a unique position where he can impact all facets of the other offense. But the issue here is that he's listed as a starting safety. You pull him down to star, that means you got a backup at one safety position. Well, the problem for Florida State is that their other safety, Trey Marshall, is suspended for the first half.
And one of their main backups, Nate Andrews, is out.
So this leaves them in a bit of a quagmire here. Let's say, for argument's sake, let's say they do play Derwin at star because it seems like everything's been trending that way. Okay. What are they going to do at safety? Well, they've got A.J. Westbrook. They've got Erman Lane. You already said Nate Andrews is out. And they've got the guy who's listed as the starting star right now in Kyle Myers. Those guys are very limited players.
Yeah.
They could bring there becomes an issue here as far as like how they're going to mask those guys. If they want to play Derwin at star and keep both of those guys back, then I do not think that is a winning strategy for Florida State for two reasons. The first reason is that against a non-loaded box, I really like Alabama's chances of running the football on you between a very strong left side of the offensive line, between one of the best running back stables in the country, and between a quarterback that we all know can run the ball extremely well. I do not think that you can stop Alabama's ground game with an even box number.
Yep.
The second issue with that is if you play sort of those 2D middle of the field open coverages with two safeties that aren't all that great, you're going to have a lot of opportunities to throw the ball in front of those safeties. Now, can Jalen hit those square ins 15 yards down the field that you're going to have to hit against those guys? I don't know. But or sort of seam routes to your tight ends and stuff. At the very least, though, the opportunities are going to be there to throw the football into those windows. So if they don't play too deep, then they're going to bring one of those guys down into the box and play some sort of single high looks. Well, then it becomes, can Alabama stretch the field vertically?
Yeah. And, for all that it's uncertain about how Jalen has improved, he looked good throwing to receivers deep down the field on A-Day. And I think that's, there's only so much you can take away from that, but I think it's fair to assume that he will have improved some at that. And now you've got your corners isolated, and you've got a third or fourth string safety as the only line of defense behind them. And, as good as Tavares McFadden is on one side, he's a ball hawk, but I don't know that he's fast. Like he's certainly no slouch, but I don't think he has top end speed the way that Calvin Ridley and Robert Foster and Jerry Jeudy do.
Right.
So I think that if you line him up on an island as good as he is, and he's also one of his weaknesses as a player is he's not great at jamming off the line. He's not a super physical guy.
Right.
which Alabama can take advantage of the run game. But if Foster or Ridley gets a clean release on him, there are going to be times when they run by him.
Right. Right.
And if you've got Foster or Ridley running by your corner, and the a third or fourth string safety is the only line of defense back there, I feel good about Alabama's chances to hit at least a couple of those plays.
Right.
And all it takes is a couple of those to really loosen things up.
Yeah. I would love to see, some shot throws here. There's a few things that I would love to see early in the game. I would love to see some shot throws. I'd love to see Alabama play fast, play very fast. Yeah. I remember, and no guarantee that same thing is going to happen this year, but I remember last year in Florida State's early games, both against Ole Miss, against Louisville, they had so much trouble when they were being tempoed. Even with Derwin in the lineup against Ole Miss, they had so much trouble when they were being tempoed as far as keeping their assignments, not busting, getting guys lined up in the correct spots. So I would love to see Alabama really try to come out and play very fast. I think they're better equipped to do that this year with Jalen in his second year, and the communication should be better here. You got a returning center and a returning quarterback, which is a really, really great thing for the offense. And one other thing that I would like to see is last year when they played tempo, it would usually be another run or it'd be an RPO. But yeah. I would love to see this year when they tempo, I'd love to see some just straight throws mixed in. Mm-hmm. Run the ball once, get a first down, tempo them, and then throw it.
Yeah, throw quick slants.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be, Jimbo's pro style, complicated route trees and reads, but just get out there and chuck it,
Yeah. And I really think, it's sort of just to look at this game sort of holistically for a second. If Alabama gets last year's Jalen, I don't want to put everything on Jalen. That's not fair because there's a whole lot of guys that are going to be playing this game. But as often happens, the quarterback is sort of the position it comes down to for Alabama because they're so uber talented at every other spot. If Jalen comes out and plays the way he did last year, this is probably going to be a very close game.
Yep.
If Jalen comes out and plays like a better version of how he played last year, insofar as his ability to throw the ball, especially throw the ball down the field, I think Alabama could win this going away.
Yep.
Because I don't think that the Florida State offense is talented enough without the help of short fields to put up big numbers in this game. I don't know if that's how you see it.
No, I agree. And the thing about that is that here is an underrated advantage for Alabama. People want to throw the advantage to Florida State on special teams because of Ricky Aguayo and because of Alabama's uncertainties at kicker. And certainly field goal kicking is probably the most important part of special teams, but they are not in a good situation at punter. Their punter's not great. And J.K. Scott is fantastic.
Right.
Teams are trading punts at any point. That averages out to a major advantage in field position for Alabama. It really does.
Yeah. So that's a good thing. I think this is a nice matchup for the defense. As far as we don't necessarily know in every regard what to expect from them, but there's a possibility that this is like a nice. It shouldn't be like I don't know. I mean, we already went over the offense, but I just feel good. I have to admit that I feel very good about the defense's chances here to stop the offense because I don't think that they should be able to throw the ball effectively.
Yep.
Sorry, go.
This is the point that I've heard Bud make several times in recent weeks. When's the last time a true pro style offense beat Alabama?
Like true pro style. Well, it's got to be 2011 LSU, right?
2011 LSU, yeah.
So I mean that's something that was they beat them in a very different way.
Yes. And this is obviously that's sort of an unfair not really a great comparison to make, because these are very different sorts of teams, even if you call them pro style. But Florida State huddles.
Yeah.
They don't hurry up and don't have a lot of RPOs, because that's just not really who Jimbo is as a coach. No. And I think that helps Alabama a lot, especially, if you're concerned about defensive line depth and concerned about how many guys you can put out there. You worry about those guys getting tired, but I don't think Florida State's not going to run 99 plays against you.
The offenses that have given Alabama trouble are the offenses that are able to put them in lots of different conflicts. Put the individual players in lots of different conflicts. There's nothing. Let me put it this way. If you look at the offenses that have given Alabama trouble, whether it's the sort of the offenses that can put you in conflicts, or the offenses with a great quarterback, or the offenses with superstars at the wide receiver position, Florida State doesn't really seem to have anything.
Yep.
That dovetails with things that Alabama has struggled with under Saban.
Right.
Which is why the only way that Florida State is going to be super successful offensively, in all likelihood, is if this Alabama defense, particularly the front, is vulnerable. There's one of two things needs to happen for Florida State to have a big offensive day. The biggest thing probably is that Alabama's defensive front needs to play poorly. A secondary thing which will help, but it won't suddenly turn it into a huge day for Florida State, is if Trayvon Diggs is awful. Now, if Trayvon Diggs is awful, that's going to create a huge liability for Alabama, but only in one specific area. And as long as Alabama is stopping the run consistently, Diggs will be an issue no matter what. But he's an issue that Alabama should be able to cover for, in the sense that it shouldn't be a game changer.
Right.
But if they go out there and they can't stop the run and Trayvon is getting beat left and right, then they're in trouble.
Right. Yeah. It's just the only way I really see Alabama losing this game is if Jalen is exactly what he was last year,
right,
can't get anything going on offense,
right,
and the defensive line there's a huge drop off, and they can't stop the run that well, and Florida State's wide receivers come up with some huge play. It feels like it takes a lot of things for Florida State to win this game, and usually all of those things don't happen in the same game. Certainly not with the kind of players that Florida State has on offense.
Yeah. This would be
like Florida. I mean, this is the most talented team I think Alabama has played overall since maybe 2014 Ohio State, but not in the exact ways that you need to be talented, that you need to have great players in the right places to beat Alabama.
Right. And certainly on offense, they're not nearly as talented as the Clemson teams.
Right. Yeah.
I feel good. We're probably towards the end here. Should we sort of go with predictions?
Yep. I think it's going to be a bit of a struggle at first. Florida State's maybe going to hit a couple plays downfield against Trayvon to end up getting a couple scores. Alabama's things are going to be tough at first as they sort of maybe Jalen works through kind of the nerves and the boxes are loaded, so they're having trouble running the ball. I think things loosen up. I think Jalen hits a couple of deep balls. I think the box loosens and Bout really starts to get going on the ground, and Alabama kind of pulls away at the end. I think they're going to cover this. The spread's 7.5. I think they're going to cover that. I would say 31-20, 31-17.
Okay. My prediction, that sounds pretty much what I was going to say. I was going to say 28-17, just because I'm not going to pick Alabama to make a field goal.
Yeah, that's probably fair. Now, one chip shot. They'll stall on the red. They'll maybe get a short field and stall in the red zone, and Papanastis will hit it like
a 23-yarder.
Yeah. There's not this is not going to be any like Yeah.
Yeah, I think the last thing I would say, and this is a lot of people have talked about the fact that Alabama hasn't really played an opener in which they took the field with a chance to lose in a very long time, probably since Virginia Tech in 2009.
Yep.
And that's true. The interesting thing that goes along with that is that Alabama hasn't played an opener in which they've had to really show their cards, especially on offense, right away. And there's been a long history the last few years of Gumps getting all up in arms about an Alabama offensive performance against a team that we knew they were going to beat going into the game, only to see that offense, or only to learn in the subsequent weeks that offensive performance wasn't at all a reflection of the type of offense that Alabama was going to have. Like, for instance, the Kentucky game last year, or the Virginia Tech
in 2014.
Or Virginia Tech in 2013, the opening game that year.
Yeah.
Or Colorado State in 2013. It's just like, there's a very long history. Or Louisiana Monroe in 2015. There's a very long tradition of having these games, even against Power 5 opponents, that Alabama knows they are going to win. They don't show all their cards, and the offense ends up producing a disappointing performance that isn't at all a reflection of what we're going to see in subsequent weeks. But this year, it's different. Alabama
this year, they have to put all the cards on the table.
Yeah. Not only is this the best team that Alabama's faced in an opening week in a long time, but it's far and away the best defense that they faced.
Yep.
So we're going to have to see the true offense here. And I think that it's going to be very interesting as far as how that changes preparation and what that means as far as playing time goes. How much do they work Bo in this game, and how much do they work Jalen running the ball in this game? So I'm very excited to see that. This is as excited as I've been about an opener since, I don't know, Clemson.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big one. I'm super pumped.
So I'm real excited. I think Alabama wins by 2 scores. If they play Super Bowl, outside chance of 3 scores. And I really hope that that's right.
Yeah. It's I said earlier that it seems that a lot of things have to happen for Florida State to win this game. You can absolutely see how they do, certainly on defense, certainly on when Alabama has the ball. You can see how those things could happen.
Right.
I don't expect them all to happen, but it's much easier to see how they do than any other opener Alabama's played since 2008, basically.
Yeah. And I also think that this is again one of those games where if Alabama just doesn't turn the ball over, they'll be okay. And I think it's an important note, because that's an almost every game situation, but it's not an every game situation.
Yeah.
Clemson obviously being the number one example. They didn't, winning the turnover battle against Clemson wasn't enough, but it is enough against most teams. And I think Florida State, for as good as they are and 1 versus 3 and everything that goes with that, I still think that if Alabama wins the turnover battle or comes out even in the turnover battle, they really can't lose the game.
Yeah, because of the type of the things we've been talking about, the type of team that Florida State is, the type of players they have on offense, and the way they match up with Alabama. That's the reason to feel good about this matchup, despite the fact that Florida State has one of the highest overall talent levels in the country.
Yeah, because I think the big thing about the overall talent level, especially on offense, is that overall talent level is not ready to be fully realized.
Yep.
Come October, come November, it might be ready to be fully realized. But I don't think that Florida State is in the position now for that to happen. And that's my biggest reason to have confidence in Alabama. That, and I think that the safety situation is very in flux for Florida State, which I think will be helpful. So that's sort of where I come down on this game.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's going to do it for us this week. So we'll see y'all next week. And here's hoping we're celebrating a huge season opening win. So roll Tide, and we'll see y'all later.
Roll Tide.